Konnichiwa, minasan! I'm going to introduce a new concept today that is one of the most important ones that we cover in Japanese 1020. This will come up not just for the rest of this semester, but for the rest of the time that you study Japanese. This is one of our most major concepts. And it's called the short form. So the short form, we talked a little bit about, perhaps back when you were in 1010 and we were first introducing our verbs. So we have two kinds of verb conjugations, like overall in Japanese. We have the long form verbs, your mas, masen, mashita, masho, and we have like short form sentences. So we use short form in a couple of different places in Japanese. One of them is in informal speech. So when you're speaking with your friends, when you're speaking with your family, then at the ends of your sentences, you will be using short form verbs and adjectives and nouns. The other place where you see short form used is inside more complex grammar. So even though you may think like, oh, well then I don't have to learn short form, I'll just be polite all the time and never be informal, and then I don't have to learn short form. Unfortunately, you are going to need it because it appears inside a lot of the grammatical forms that we use in Japanese. So we'll be introducing a couple of those forms in this chapter. But first of all, I'd like to go over how we make the short form in the first place. So the first thing we're going to look at is how we make the short forms of verbs. So this chapter, we're just going to focus on the present tense. We do have short form versions of the past tense, but we'll talk about those next chapter. So for now, we'll just look at present tense. We've learned already the present tense affirmative, negative, and the past tense affirmative, negative for long form. For the present tense affirmative, what do we use? That's right, this is mas, the form of the verb that we first learned in Japanese 1010. So like tabemasu, nomimasu, yomimasu. What is the negative version of that? It's masen. So we have like tabemasen, nomimasen, benkyou shimasen is our negative present tense. How about in the past? Past tense affirmative, we end with mashita. So, tabemashita, nomimashita, benkyou shimashita. How about the negative? The negative is masen deshita. So we have, for example, tabemasen deshita, nomimasen deshita, benkyou shimasen deshita. So that is what we've learned so far for the long forms. All of these long form structures have an equivalent in the short form, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, just like we have a present tense affirmative and negative for long form, we have a present tense affirmative and negative for short form. The affirmative is what we call the jisho form or the dictionary form. And what this means, jisho or dictionary form, is just that it's the way the verb is written on, for example, your vocab list for the chapter, or on the vocab list in Genki. This is the most basic form of the verb. It's called the dictionary form because it's the one that you'd find in the dictionary. So, for example, taberu, nomu, iku, kuru, suru. These ones that end in u, the most basic form of the verb. This is the jisho form. So, when we want to put something in the present tense affirmative, we use the jisho form. So this means the same thing as the mas, the long form mas. It's just a short form version of it. So what if we want something that means the same as the long form masen? something that is in the present tense and negative, but is the short form. That is the new form that we're going to introduce today, the nai form. So nai form, once again, this is the same as like masen in long form. So it's a present tense negative ending. When we make the nai form, first of all, let's start with our irregular verbs. These are the ones that we just have to memorize. So suru will change to shinai. And kuru will change to konai. So these are just ones that we have to practice. This suru, shinai, kuru, konai is also going to apply to any of the verbs that have suru or kuru as the verb that's part of them. So for example, benkyou suru, benkyou shinai. Denwa suru, denwa shinai. Motte kuru, motte konai. Tsurete kuru, tsurete konai. Do verbs are very simple. They always have the simplest conjugation. So when we have a do verb, all we have to do is get rid of the do and replace it with nai. So for example, here we have a verb taberu. If we drop the do, we just have tabe. And then putting on the nai, we get tabe nai. So all you do is drop the do and add nai. Let's think about a couple. What would miru be? That's right, minai. How about okiru? Okinai. How about oriru? Orinai. So all we're doing with the do verbs is getting rid of the do and replacing it with nai. With u verbs, as always, it's a little bit more complicated. An u verb, we have to change the sound, the vowel sound at the end, to a different vowel sound. So we've already kind of gone over something similar to this when we did the conversion between the dictionary form and the mas form. So, for example, the verb au, the mas form we changed to aimasu. Or iku, mas form is ikimasu. Hanasu, mas form is hanashimasu. Matsu, mas form is machimasu. Shinu, mas form is shinimasu. Asobu, mas form is asobimasu. Yomu, mas form is yomimasu. Wakaru, mas form is wakarimasu. So we're changing this u at the end to an e sound, right? We have to do the same kind of thing when we make the nai form. But instead of changing to the e sound, we want to change to an ah sound. So we are changing ku to ka. Su to sa. Tsu to ta. Because we have ta, chi, tsu, te, to, right? Nu to na. Bu to ba. Mu to ma. Du to da. So the consonant sound stays the same, but we change the vowel sound. So let's take a look at some examples. Here we have no mu. No mu. This is an sound. We want to replace the oo in mu with an ah. So we get no ma. No ma nai. Unfortunately, we do have a special one that we have to kind of keep an eye out for. instead of changing when it's just hiragana u and there's no consonant, instead of changing the hiragana u to just a hiragana a, we actually change it to wa. So ka u, we actually want to change to ka wa nai. Ka wa nai. We also have one that's just entirely an exception. Aru just completely changes to nai. So it's a little bit irregular in this case, so we have to keep track of that. Aru becomes nai. But the rest of the verbs will follow this pattern here. So those are the changes that we make to verbs to put them in short form. But we also have a short form version of adjectives and nouns. Fortunately, the short form version of adjectives and nouns is very straightforward. It's pretty simple. The thing that most people have difficulty with is that they don't really remember the adjective conjugation that we already went over in chapter 5. So if you look at the conjugation of these adjectives and it seems maybe unfamiliar or confusing to you, you might want to look over the information in chapter 5 one more time. You can find it on page 132. That's the 3rd edition, sorry. You can find it on page 132 to 134 of your Genki textbook. So let's take a look at these together. So when we have a present tense affirmative adjective, we have either an e adjective ending with e, des, or a na adjective and noun, just the word plus des. So we say like atsui desu, genki desu, gakusei desu. When we make them negative, we either get rid of the e and put kunai desu, or we put janai desu. So we have like atsui, atsukunai desu. Or with a na adjective, genki janai desu. With a noun, gakusei janai desu. With the past tense, we either want to get rid of the e and add katta desu for e adjectives, or for na adjectives and nouns, we're going to add deshita. So we can say atsui changes to atsukatta desu. Genki deshita. Gakusei deshita. And when we're making them negative past tense, once again, for e adjectives, we drop the e and put kunakatta desu. And for nouns and na adjectives, we have janakatta desu. So, atsui, atsukunakatta desu. Genki, a na adjective, genki janakatta desu. Gakusei, a noun, gakusei janakatta desu. If this doesn't sound familiar, or if you feel like you really struggle to remember this, once again, it might be a good idea to go back to page 132, to go back to chapter 5 of your Genki book and look over these adjective conjugations again, because they're not going to go away. However, when we put them in the short form, it is very simple as long as you can remember this setup that we studied before. So, our present tense short form. Let's start with the present tense affirmative short form. So for our long form, we have the e adjective with the e still on it plus des. We have the na adjective plus des. We have the noun plus des. In short form, we just drop the des. So an e adjective like atsui desu, samui desu, isogashii desu, we're just going to get rid of des. So we have atsui, samui, isogashii. With a na adjective, we're going to drop the des and add da. So genki desu, genki da. にぎやかです。にぎやかだ。有名です。有名だ。Same with a noun. We'll just drop the des and add da. So, 学生です。学生だ。日本人です。日本人だ。アメリカ人です。アメリカ人だ。Let's try some down here. What do you think the short form of these words is? Take a minute to see if you can put them together. Okay, let's check. So, 大きいです. The short form should be just 大きい. How about いいです? Just いい. How about 元気です? 元気だ. And 学生です? 学生だ. Good news! The negative version is even more straightforward, as long as you know how to make them negative in the first place. So once we have our negatives in the long form, our kunai desu or janai desu, in order to make them negative short form, we're just going to get rid of the desu. So if I have okiku nai desu, the short form is okiku nai. If I have yoku nai desu, the short form is yoku nai. If I have genki janai desu, the short form is genki janai. If I have gakusei janai desu, the short form is gakusei janai. So it's very simple and straightforward. All I have to do is drop des. The only thing that's tricky about it is that I need to know how to make these negatives in the first place. So once again, you may want to review the adjective conjugations from chapter 5. And for now, that's all there is to making the short form. We will talk in the future about some ways that we can use the short form in our sentences, but for now, let's practice making the form.